guys, introspection here, and it is finally that time of year again. The time of year where we give each other stuff. Now yes, I know I probably should have made this kind of video a few weeks ago, but I only recently had the idea for this video, so I'm making it as soon as I can. But before I continue with the video, I want to make one thing really clear. The holidays really should be focused on family and friends, and if they're not for you, I highly recommend that you stop watching this video, find the nearest family member, and give them a really big hug. And if they're really far away so you can't do that, then find a way to give them a message, whether it's through text message or email or letter. Send them a message that shows that you're really loving and affectionate through whatever means you wish, perhaps even smoke signal if that's your preference. But send them some sort of affectionate message, because generally you should focus on family and friends just all the time, year round, but especially during the holidays. And if you don't, I highly recommend you change that. Now, if you're getting a gift for somebody, chances are you're going to want them to enjoy or like that gift. And yes, they certainly should be appreciative if you get them something that they don't necessarily like or enjoy, because you probably put effort into getting them that gift. That being said, you're still probably going to want to get them something they're really going to like and enjoy. So in this video, I'm going to tell you just general information that should help you find what it is that they're going to want or like. Now, I'm going to primarily be focusing on one or two things, just because those are the things that I'm familiar with and I've been a victim to. It's happened where I've gone and tried to purchase something for somebody that I just didn't personally understand really well and got really confused and tried to get them something and it wasn't even close to what I was originally trying to get, and it just becomes this whole mess. So this is just the one or two that I'm primarily familiar with. That being said, there's still going to be a fair amount of general information here that should still be able to help you, even if the thing that you're getting is not necessarily the examples that I'm giving here. So the first thing I'm going to be talking about is different consoles, or video game consoles. Now, one thing you need to understand about video game consoles is that they work or come out in generations. So there's the current generation, there's the previous generation, there's a generation from like 3 years ago, and so on and so forth. Now, each generation will have different versions of the console. Now, I know that sounds extremely confusing and complicated, probably unnecessarily, but just hear me out. I think I found a better way to familiarize yourself with it, or at least explain it in more familiar terms. Think of consoles as a car. Every time a new car comes out, it's a new generation. But each generation will have different versions of the car. So some cars will have automatic, some will have manual, some will have off-road, some will have the amazing TV that comes out of the top of the car that will hopefully keep the kiddos quiet for like 5 minutes on the 2-hour-long car ride. But the point is that it kind of works like this. Now don't worry, there are nowhere near as many generations or versions of consoles as there is cars. A new generation tends to come out every 5 to 10 years or so, give or take. And there's usually only 3, 4, maybe 5 versions in each generation. So it's nowhere near as daunting as trying to figure out all the different versions of cars or generations of cars, because they don't come out nearly in the different quantity in terms of versions, but it still works on the same general principle. So now you're thinking about what to get this person. So the first thing you need to think about is, what are they going to be able to want to do? Now I'm going to be specifically focusing on generations, and then I'm going to be focusing on how to figure out which version within each generation. So when speaking about generations, you want to make sure you want to get the latest generation if the person you're getting it for is somebody who wants to be able to interact with other people online. Because yes, previous generations can do that, but they can only do it with consoles, generally speaking, of the same generation. Now, of course, there are a few exceptions to this rule, but for them, or at least none that I know of, now that I think about it. But generally speaking, you're not going to be able to use a previous gen console and use it to communicate, or at least efficiently, with the new gen console. If you want to play a game with somebody else online, you're going to need a new gen console. Now, of course, if somebody else that this person knows has an older gen console and they're both online capable, then they might be able to do that. But generally speaking, everybody's going to have the new generation. Therefore, if anybody wants to play with the mass amount of people online, chances are you're probably going to want the new generation of console. Now, the other reason that you're probably going to want to consider the newest generation, other than the obvious better graphics and quality, is the fact that the latest games are on there. So if you have somebody who just wants to play the new game that they saw and are really excited for, you need to make sure you get the latest generation of console, because the earlier generations are not going to be able to play that. Now, the reasons why you would want to get previous gen consoles, there's a few. The first and obvious one is if they collect things. But there's another reason. So let's say hypothetically you're getting one for somebody who's somewhat casual, doesn't really care too much about the latest games. They just want something to play every now and again, and they would like to keep being able to get games. Then you might want to get them a previous gen console, because generally speaking, previous gen video games tend to be cheaper. Not always. There are consoles that are really hard to shop for, but a lot of previous gen consoles will be able to get games on the really cheap. So it'll be like $15-$20 as opposed to the $60 games are worth for the current gen consoles. And that's how much those games were worth when that console was the current gen. So those are other reasons you might want to consider getting older gen consoles, or perhaps even that they're just cheaper and whoever you're getting it for isn't going to care. Like if you're getting it for a really, really small child and they just need something to entertain themselves with, then you can probably get away with getting them an older generation console. But those are the things that you want to consider when doing generations. Now, in terms of versions, okay, so if you do the math, there are like 3 to 5 versions in each generation, and there are 3 generations, well, more than 3 generations, but the main ones that people will think about when I say previous generations are probably the previous 3 generations. And there's different companies, so it's going to take me hours for me to tell you the differences between each version. And frankly, if you've already figured out via what I've said about generations that you want to get this person this generation. So let's say you already figured out, yes, my person that I'm purchasing this for is going to want to play online. Then you've already figured out that you want to get the latest generation. You don't need me to sit here and explain them all. Or if you've already figured out that they're not going to care about it and you're going to get them previous generation, then that's just, the video is going to be like 2 hours long. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to link to other YouTubers who are down in the the description below, who unfortunately don't know about me. Sad. But hopefully that'll change when I become famous. But moving on. There are going to be YouTubers in the description down below, and the videos will be organized so that you can see, okay, here are the previous generation versions, their current generation. So after you figure out which generation you want to get them, then you can see, okay, this is the video I want, so that they can explain to me the different versions of the console. So that will be down in the description below if you are looking into that. Now, the other thing involving video games that tends to get really obscured and mixed up is when you get the actual video game. So whether it's on a CD or a cartridge, what actually very frequently happens is that if somebody wants a game and you know they want that game, you will end up buying that game for them, which is great. But the problem is that you're not going to end up getting it for the console that this person has or may get. And then they sort of, they shouldn't be upset at you because you clearly put effort into this, but they're not going to be able to play the game because they don't have that console. And this happens rather frequently, and it's understandable because it gets really, really confusing, and frankly, it's frustrating that people make it so that the CDs won't work with the different consoles. I mean, I know why they make it, but that doesn't make it any less annoying. So if you're going to consider giving them a video game and you don't know which console it is, well, generally you'll be able to figure it out online. But if you can't, or if you just generally want to take a much simpler and efficient path, here's what I recommend you do. Get pictures of the console and then take it to a video game store. Anybody who is even remotely familiar with video games will be able to tell you which discs to look at, or cartridges, or whatever it is. As soon as they see pictures of that console, most people will be able to tell you which generation and which CDs or disc section to look in. So just get the pictures, send them or show them to whoever you're going to, and they will most likely be able to instantly tell you which consoles to get, even if you don't know the name. So long as you have a picture or the specific name of the console that you're getting, then you will be able to get the disc. It will be really easy. Just make sure you have one of the two things, and make sure you get the name right. It's not uncommon for people to get the current generation name mixed up with the previous one, or just get them confused with other consoles that are completely different lines. So photograph is probably your best option if you're not too familiar with this kind of thing. But so long as you have one of those two things, go to a video game store. They'll be able to help you out pretty easily. Now, the next thing I want to say, oh god, the computers. Now, these are really, really great, but I'm not going to lie, they can get significantly confusing to shop for because they're not as streamlined as consoles. Like, if I wanted to, I could probably sit here and tell you the different versions, and it would be pretty simple to explain. But there are so many different parts in a PC that shopping for this thing can get somewhat intimidating. But don't worry, I have a few tips for this too. The first thing is that, well, right off the bat, if obviously you're probably going to get a pre-built PC because some people will like to build them. But if you're buying it, chances are you're getting a pre-built one. In which case, what I'm going to do, again, description below, ones that are not necessarily the best or worst, but I'm pretty confident you'll get the bang for your buck out of the ones I'm going to recommend down below. Now, the other thing that I recommend is that you go ahead and ask the child's or whoever you're getting for friend. And this goes for everything. Because here's the thing. If they're relatively close with whoever you're purchasing it for, they're probably going to know exactly what that person wants. If they want a very specific console with a very specific game, they're probably the best persons to ask because they're probably going to be the one who is constantly talking about them or talking with them about whatever it is that they want to get. This is generally a lot of the conversation when the holidays start to come closer and closer. So keep that in mind when you're getting a console. If you're not sure what kind of console or which game this person wants, ask their friend. Whether if it's your child, ask your child's friend. Chances are they're going to know, and if they don't know, they're probably going to know which of their friends will know, and that's usually going to be the easiest way to figure out which game they want or which console they want. And that goes for the computer too. They're probably going to know exactly how powerful they're expecting the computer to be. Now, if they're not into computers, then it's probably going to be a little bit more complicated, in which case, here's what I recommend you do. Generally speaking, people will know other people who are into computers and know these kinds of things. You just don't know they know because it doesn't come up in conversation. Like, if you're not into computers, then chances are somebody who is probably not going to talk about it because you're not interested in it, and that would just make the conversation really confusing. So what I recommend you do is to, like, post on Facebook or whatever social media site you like to use. Say, hey, do any of the people I know anything about computers? Chances are, not always, but chances are somebody is going to know enough to tell you the difference between graphics cards and motherboards and so on and so forth. And they'll probably be able to recommend a computer, and if not, then you'll probably have somebody at the very least that if you find a computer for a good deal, and you can be like, okay, send the link to the person will be able to open up the link, check the parts and say, yeah, this is a good computer, or yeah, don't get this. This is a piece of junk. Now, I will say that there have been one or two providers that have been selling computers that look really cool, but are terrible, and so many people are getting the short end of the stick, not because they're just generally not very obvious. To anybody who doesn't know about computers, and frankly, just to anybody who is somewhat familiar with computers and is still not looking into building them, it can probably fool you into thinking it's a good computer or it's put together correctly. And a lot of these problems are things that people who know a decent amount of computers can probably fix. But chances are, if you're getting a computer for somebody else, you probably don't have the knowledge to deal with that kind of thing. So I'm going to link down below to video or things that suggesting that the PCs coming from this specific provider are ones to avoid. And again, I'm going to also link down which PCs I might recommend or ones that I'm confident that you'll get the bang for your buck for. Now next is when you're purchasing for somebody who is into anime. Totally switch gears, I know. But, and I'll probably make some, I don't know when, but sometime in the future, I'm likely to make a anime or people who are into anime videos similar to how I made the video game series explaining several different stereotypes, but focusing on getting a gift for an anime person. One thing to keep in mind is that there are a multitude of different animes. Just it's a series of shows. Like there's one show that is completely different from another show, and granted, occasionally you'll be able to just pick a very popular anime and there's a somewhat good chance that this person will like it, therefore you can get some sort of product or knickknack for them. But not always, and it's not the most confident method to use. You're probably going to want to make sure you figure out which anime they're into, because it's not all just one thing, and people who are not too into anime are not necessarily going to know that. But it's not all one thing, and it's generally several different types of shows. There are several different genres, several different variety of shows, so you kind of need to know what show they're into. And again, this goes back to me telling you to look into or look for somebody who talks to this person, a friend or somebody who is, say, also in an anime club with this person. Then they'll probably be able to tell you which anime they're into and which products. Sometimes their phone cases, necklaces, the list goes on. And generally speaking, for the people who are really into anime, you could get them one of these things and they'll really like it. But you sort of need to know which anime they're into for that to work. And again, really simple. Just figure out which anime they're into by talking to a friend that they're into or talk to a lot. Because again, during these holidays, conversations generally tend to start consisting of what they want for Christmas or Hanukkah or whatever holiday you like to celebrate. These conversations will start to arise, and even people who aren't into anime will start to know what kind of anime products this person will want to have. So yeah, just keep in mind, different versions of anime. You need to make sure you pick the show that they particularly like, or one of the shows that they particularly like, and the item from that show they would want. And again, pretty easy to solve if you know the person's friends, or just ask them. They will probably know, and they will be able to tell you which product that you should get them, because again, conversation. Well guys, that is it for this video. If you have any other tips on purchasing gifts, or just other video suggestions that I could use, go ahead and leave it in the comment section down below. Otherwise, make sure to hit that subscribe button and that bell button so you can catch my video in the next 2 weeks. Until then, hear nothing and listen to all. Bye guys!